everyone to EKS&H Consulting's online workshop on budgeting and planning in higher education. My name is Shannon Beasley, and I am the training manager at EKS&H Consulting and will be your host for today's workshop. During today's workshop, all attendees will be on mute. We invite you to use the chat question feature on the upper right-hand side of your screen to submit questions during the workshop. You may need to click the orange arrow button to expand the GoToWebinar control panel to use the questions feature. We will answer your questions at the end of the presentation. In today's workshop, we will cover an overview of budgeting and planning solutions for higher education. We will also provide a demonstration of IBM Cognos TM1 for planning in higher education. We will wrap up today's webinar with a question and answer session and discuss next steps. Before I turn things over to our presenters, I'd like to introduce Mike Tagto, Account Executive at EKS&H Consulting. Mike?
Thanks, Shannon. Mike Tagto here with EKS&H. And just a little bit about us. We're an IBM Premier Business Partner, and that means that we focus on the IBM Business Analytics Suite, which is Cognos, TM1, and SPSS. We're a consulting, training, and solution expert, and we have an industry focus specifically in higher education. We've done over 30 higher ed implementations. Today's workshop is the second in a series of 5 workshops. We had one last month, September 23rd, where we focused on predictive analytics. And then today, of course, is budgeting and planning. We have one scheduled for December 4th, which is business analytics. And then we're also going to be doing data integration and data cleansing and demystifying Banner in the early part of 2015. I'd like to introduce our main presenter, and that's Jeff Miller. Jeff is a senior consultant with EKS&H. He has over 20 years experience in finance and 6 years of working with the IBM planning solutions. He's going to be presenting and demonstrating TM1 today. Jeff?
Mike, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this with our audience today. As we look here at a list of the different challenges that we face in budgeting and planning in higher education, we can really kind of condense them down into a simple formula that we as a team typically need to work together. We need workflow, we need data that we can trust and that's secure, and we need to be able to work in a timely fashion. We're talking about a single plan in one place for all of our users. We've got a large list of challenges here that we can see on the screen. I'm sure the people in this audience could probably add some very meaningful challenges to that list. But again, we can condense this down to the collaboration as we work as a team, with data that typically comes from multiple sources. Banner is probably one that people are familiar with on this call, but you probably have a lot of different places you need to go to grab the data you need for the plan. You want to bring it into a single place, and then in a timely and powerful fashion, you want to work together to deliver that plan for your customers. The solution we're going to look at today, as Mike mentioned, is part of the IBM Business Analytics Suite. I typically you'll hear me call it the Performance Management Solution. And it's a very powerful one that addresses all of those issues that we just talked about. It is a server-based application, so in a single place you control the security and you pull the data and the other hierarchies, such as your departments and your projects, into a single place for your users. It works in memory, and so you can make real-time changes to that data, whether it's stuff that you key in or data that you pull from Banner, for example, and people are able to immediately work with that. There's no need to email out files, for example, and try to bring them back in and then assemble that into a single plan. We have a lot of customers in higher education who have to do that very manual process where you are applying all this work to sending stuff out, bringing it back, certainly checking the integrity of the data. This is a single solution that does all that heavy lifting for you. It works either over the web or through Excel, and in a single place, again, controls the security so that people see what they're supposed to see and they don't see what they're not supposed to see, and the workflow so people work together as a team. And the administration of this application is straightforward enough that we like to say that it's owned by finance. It's not a solution that needs to be administered by IT. After we implement the solution for you, it's something that you can be in charge of going forward. All right. So as a team, and we'll see this here in just a moment as we step through the demonstration, the workflow that guides us through what we're supposed to do is a very simple and visual one to understand. In this example that we're looking at here, it's applied by department. You can actually apply that by project or any other way that you need to do it. It's stored at a single place in the application, so again, it's very simple for users to collaborate. The solution works from a single server. You're able to access it either through Excel or over the web, for example. And so in one place, all of your world here is brought into one place where in real time you can make changes, do the what-if type modeling that you want to do for best and worst case scenarios for your school, and again, bring all your users into one secure application. For individual users, let's say folks who are the analysts and the managers and so on who are supporting the school, it's very powerful and very simple to understand. It gives you the ability to do any kind of what-if modeling that you want to do, and changes that you make especially immediately flow through all the parts of the model that are affected. We'll see this here in just a moment, the way that you can start from a very detailed plan and see this flow right through to the most summarized level, including the reporting that you want to do as well. If you're at a more senior level in the university, let's say someone who's a dean or a chancellor, perhaps the CFO or vice president of finance, it also makes it very simple to set the targets that you want people to achieve, particularly if you want to do something like pull in the previous year's actual results, maybe add some kind of percentage to them as a baseline, and then enable that kind of detailed plan that needs to match the targets that you've given. So again, it is a completely integrated solution. It's part of the IBM Business Analytics Suite, and part of the strength of the solution is that you can extend it into predictive analytics and web-based reporting, real-time reporting, but it also is a very powerful standalone solution as well, and we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. This is the dashboard that we just saw in PowerPoint, and this is the way that a user can log in and from a single place see the critical metrics that they have in their world, right? I'm seeing data that's important to me, either displayed as a graph or highlighted, for example, in conditional formatting, so I can see ways that I'm missing the target account by account. This is very important for users, but it can also be personalized. The data that I see when I first log in is not necessarily what other people are going to see, but we're all integrated in this same solution. After I see the critical metrics that I am working on, off to the left here in the margin, we can see either reports that I can go into to get more detail around these critical data points, or I can jump into the plan, which I plan to do right now. This is the workflow that we just discussed. It's very simple and visual. The items here include these little red squares, which indicate to me that work has not started on this part of the workflow. Items in orange, which indicates that people are working on it, or in green, which says that I have finished my work on this and submitted it to my supervisor for review. This workflow is applied at the department level, but just to reemphasize, it could be applied to any kind of flow that you need. A list of projects, for example, a list of divisions, however it is that you need to split this out and assign to people, it can be assigned to them. As part of my work today, I want to go in for the College of Arts and Sciences and look at some revenue and some headcount planning, and doing that is as simple as clicking on a link. The solution opens up for me, and the first thing I want to work on is tuition. Tuition is a classic, what we call a driver-based model, where the number of students who are enrolled multiplied against those rates that you're charging will give you your tuition dollars that you expect for the year. Notice here from this pull-down menu, I can simply go from the tuition I'm looking at into the enrollment that I expect for the year. And as part of the planning that I'm doing, I want to do a little kind of what-if modeling on full-time undergrad enrollment. I can expand this here to see the list of the different schools, like the business school, the College of Arts and Sciences, and so on. And I'm going to go to this intersection here of the total year's enrollment that I'm expecting and all of the undergrad full-time heads. I'm going to increase this, that's why I'm typing INC, increase this by 10%, and we can see the changes flow through the model. This is something that we call breakback, where we start from a more consolidated level of a hierarchy and make a change that pushes down to the lowest levels of the hierarchy as well. The change that I just made has influenced all of these different schools. We can see this because the data is now highlighted in blue, and this is an example of the kinds of very powerful what-if modeling that we have within the solution, right? I can create as many different what-if scenarios as I want, just from selecting from this menu right here, and they'll be stored inside of the solution as opposed to like in a standalone Excel file that may be on a flash drive or someplace like that. And any time that I decide one of these what-if models should be the new plan, that it should change the data, I can push this out with a click of this little check mark button right here. At this point, the reason that this data is highlighted in blue is because only I see these changes. This is not something that any other users are seeing. They're still seeing the original data from the budget. But again, if I'm an authorized user, I can overwrite that on demand, and I can store as many of these what-if models as I need in the application. So there's very little trade-off between the amount of time it takes to create this what-if model versus the ease and the flexibility of having it, right? In addition to the changes I've made in enrollment, when I go back to my tuition, I can see the impact to the tuition dollars as well. This is an example of the power of the real-time in-memory performance on a single server that's doing these calculations. Now that I have done my revenue planning for the day, I want to take a look at some of the headcount planning that we're working on as well. Typically, as Mike mentioned, we've had more than 30 different implementations for higher education, and something like 75 to 80% of the expenditures at a given school is directly related to headcount. In this model, we can see the very detailed planning we're doing at this point. Right? This is something where typically from your payroll system, you would pull in the users here. You have some users like, some professors here where this person is leaving, it looks like sometime in the middle of the year. We have the raise month that's indicated for folks, and if we needed to hire somebody new, right, some kind of new hire, we can pull that person in, let's say in November, and then I'm just going to copy and paste, just as kind of a standard Excel function, the benefits plans and salary, pay grade choices and stuff for this person as a placeholder for this position. You notice here it's the same thing where it updates in blue, highlighting to me that I can see these what-if changes that I'm doing, but they're not changing the data that other users are, right? I would have to choose to push that out to them. And now as I take this list of our now 18 different people in this department and check the expense I would expect from that, I can see this new head coming on in November. I can see that other head count rolling off in March. I can see month by month the salary expense and payroll taxes and benefits and so on that I have. And individual by individual, I can even go in and see for each month what the expense is that I would expect. This is a very powerful feature, again, because we're talking about a large amount of the expenditure for a given school where I don't have to make that trade-off between the speed of generating a plan, where I probably deal with more general assumptions around expense, versus a very detailed plan that would roll the stuff up for me, but that might take more time to do that. There's no trade-off when you're working in memory on the solution server. And now I come to a much more summarized view of this information. We've been planning at a very detailed level for headcount and for revenue, but now we can see this is more of an income statement type roll-up for the university. I can see the changes for tuition and fees and for my personnel expense immediately flowing through here. So whether you're talking about budgeting and planning at a detailed or more summarized level, or the kinds of reporting, obviously, that is kind of the last leg of that, this is an example of the way it's completely integrated. It can do the full solution for you, and it can do it for you with the speed and performance that you're clearly not going to get from a manual Excel-driven process. This is not to in any way denigrate Excel. Excel is a wonderful tool. Our solution extends directly into Excel, but if you've worked with a large plan trying to collaborate a number of people, you know that Excel can reach its limits, and this is the solution that can extend you beyond that. So And that is why we have users such as the University of California Office of the President opted for this solution because they felt their old budgeting and planning solution wasn't flexible enough to deal with their unique combination of the way they looked at projects and rolled up other expense, which was a more conventional way that the entire UC system worked. So the UCOP opted for our solution. The campus of the University of California, San Francisco had a slightly different requirement. They have an enormous number of funding sources that comes from the state legislature. It's typically 45 to 50,000 that they are tracking, and they are required to provide very detailed planning at the end of every month and quarter around where the funding came from, the different projects that this is being expended on, and then to report back to the legislature. With this solution, using this as a data source for real-time reporting in Cognos Business Intelligence, we were able to replace basically an entire bookcase worth of paper that was put together every month with real-time web-based reporting. So instead of having something that's always 30 days in arrears at best, you have instant performance and reporting for people who are concerned about the way funding is being applied within the system. A more mundane application, but certainly very important, is the way Portland State uses it to handle student council budgets. Every organization at Portland State University is given a certain amount of money every year for the projects and whatnot that they want to do. The students track both the budget that they've received and then the spending that they have done against those budgets in this real-time solution. So it's kind of a win-win where administration is able to track what's going on but push the bulk of the work out to the students. The students get the kind of real-time input that they want for their budgets, and all of this actually is a straightforward enough application to administer that it's mostly, I should say exclusively, owned by the finance department there. So it's the best case of a simple solution for your users and then also one that's straightforward to administer. And on that note, it's been my pleasure to speak to you today, and I'm more than happy to open the floor up for any questions we may have.
Thanks, Jeff. We do have time for some questions, and we certainly welcome more. Please remember to submit questions at this time using the question feature in the GoToWebinar tool. So, Jeff, we have a few questions for you, and you mentioned that TM1 works in Excel. Could you go into some additional detail on that?
Sure, that's fine. Getting TM1 to extend into Excel is very simple. You simply install an add-in, and so when you open up Excel and you have your little ribbon up at the top of it, you would just select TM1 as the solution, and then you can connect and use Excel exactly the way you would before, except you have this enterprise-grade solution that's handling all the calculations and data in the background.
And how much lead time does implementation of the tool require?
Right. That's an excellent question. Now, implementing the solution typically depends on the complexity of the customer's budgeting and reporting model, but a typical solution, a typical implementation cycle that we've experienced is about 8 to 12 weeks. And the nice thing about the solution is you can break it down into smaller pieces. It's not one of those solutions where you have to architect the whole thing in one go. So you could start with something that's relatively simple, like a user template for requesting basic expenditures. Then you could move into something more complicated, like that revenue model we saw for tuition, or detailed headcount planning as well.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there any particular skill set that someone needs to get into budget and planning and implementing these tools?
Sure. The skill set that you have already, that you've been using for the solution, is what you need, pretty much. The idea is we take everything that's going on in your world, we put it into a single solution. Often we start from the templates that people are working with right now as models to make it very simple and intuitive to move over to the solution. So people are still using, it feels like, the same files that they used before, for example. But again, there's this solution in the background where all the data and security is stored, and you get that real-time performance where You make a change, you can see it flow through, and you're still in Excel working just like you did before, for example.
Well, those were all the questions I had. I don't see any more coming through. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to submit? Well, Jeff gave a very thorough demonstration, and there are no other questions, so I'm going to turn things back over to Mike Tagtoe.
Yep, thanks, Shannon. Thanks, Jeff. So in review, there's a couple of takeaways that we'd like you to capture from today's presentation and demonstration. TM1 is a collaborative solution, and it basically is a database-driven solution, so there's a single version of the truth. I think that's one of the biggest things that you benefit from with implementing a solution like TM1. Real-time performance, Jeff mentioned this during his presentation, but this is all in memory, and so it's a very high-performing data source. And finally, it results in a single place for all of your planning. So as I mentioned, this is part of a workshop series, and everybody gets a star for attending today's session. We've recorded today's session as well as the predictive analytics session, so if you'd like to either pass this information on to somebody else in your organization or perhaps look at the predictive analytics session, just shoot me an email. You can see my email address on the screen, and I will get you the link for that. It's on our website. And then on December 4th, we're going to be doing business analytics in higher education, followed by the data integration, data cleansing, and the banner presentation that I mentioned previously. And as a next step, we'll follow up with you. A lot of times people want to see this in a lot more detail than Jeff was able to show in the 20 minutes or so. And so we'd be happy to pull together a demonstration for you. And with that, I wanted to thank you very much for attending today. And if you have any other questions, just shoot me an email. Thank you.
And in closing, I'd like to thank Jeff Miller for presenting on budgeting and planning in higher education for us today. Thank you to all of you for attending. We hope you found this workshop a good value of your time. As Mike mentioned, we'll be hosting more workshops like these in the future, and our next topic will be on business analytics in higher ed on December 4. Please be on the lookout for the invite. The slide deck from today's presentation will be made available online, as well as the recording. I will follow up with an email to everyone who registered for today's workshop with a link to the site. This webinar is now ending.